The Detroit Pistons give up another 40-point opening quarter to the Memphis Grizzlies in their loss. We'll talk about why that has to change and what they can do to try to change that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you have not already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So the Detroit Pistons, after having a really fantastic win against the Dallas Mavericks, come out and in the teal, by the way, I really like seeing them in the teal court. I think it looks really cool. But come out and get this loss to the Memphis Grizzlies, 122-112. I want to talk about the defense to open up the podcast a little bit later. We'll talk about Sadiq Bey having a really nice bounce back game and talk about some of the struggles from the Pistons guards late in this game a little later as well. A few things in between there too. But first, I want to start with the defense. So over the last few games, I don't feel like the Pistons offense is too much of an issue. I don't think they're exceptional offensively, but I don't feel like their problem is offense. Now they run into some spurts where they struggle moving the ball, can't hit some shots, have some really sloppy turnovers. They had a stretch tonight too. I believe early in the third quarter they had 11 turnovers. They ended up with 14, so they cleaned it up a little bit towards the end, tried to at least. But they have stretches where they really just get sloppy with the ball. But overall, I don't think offense is their issue. Defensively, I think it's 100% their issue. And it reared its head again in the first quarter of this game. The Pistons, I believe, over the last week and a half have allowed 3 40-point first quarters. That cannot happen. That you can't. You're not going to come back from that. So, after the first quarter, the Pistons won the second quarter 31-29. They lost the third quarter 32-26 and won the fourth quarter 29-21. So, basketball, seeing who wins quarters, that's not the way to go about it, but to prove a point. Outside of the first quarter, the Pistons didn't get blown out the water in any other quarter. But that opening quarter, they played zero defense, got blown off the floor, and now you're basically spotting them 14 points for the rest of the game. And it's going to be hard to come back from that. You can't come out that sloppy against the Memphis Grizzlies. You just can't do it, or you're going to set yourself back. So the opening quarter defense definitely is something that has to change for the Pistons. I don't know what they can do to try to change that. I don't know. I don't know what exactly the biggest issue is. But just going through the stats, some things that jumped out to me, or before we get to the stats I want to look at, I want to talk about something I noticed in the first quarter. The Pistons were trying to take the ball out of Ja Morant's hands, and I thought they did a decent job of doing that. I don't think Ja really killed them in that first quarter scoring-wise. I don't think he's killed them in the first quarter scoring-wise. He had 7 points, but I think he killed them with. And I hope Jay Ivey was watching this. The Pistons should go take Ja Morant's first quarter and putting up on film day, whenever they watch film, with Jay Ivey, just have them watch that entire first quarter. Because the Pistons were blitzing Ja Morant, they were trapping Ja Morant, they were crashing down all his drives, and Ja Morant in that first quarter had 5 assists, 0 turnovers. The Grizzlies shot 56% in that first quarter, 45% from deep, and I guarantee you almost all of it was attributed to Ja Morant. Ja Morant was doing an absolutely fantastic job. Just, the Pistons were taking it out of his hands, but he was making the right read every single time. Every time he was hanging in the air, waiting to see where the Pistons would rotate to, using his athleticism to wait to see where the defense rotates, and then finding the open guy over and over and over again. He was on a playmaking spree in the first quarter. So, I think that's just one of those things that, you don't want to give up 40 points. The Pistons have to be much better on their closeouts and their backside rotation. Something I'm seeing from the Pistons as of late. It looks like they're going X out on the rotations. So that means the best way for me to try to explain it, let's say Ja Morant runs a pick and roll on the right wing, and he starts going to the rim. His guy's rolling, and he throws a skip pass to that corner. So the guy that's defending the corner who is in the paint tagging down the roller. Instead of him running after that corner guy, he's running to that left wing. And then the guy who was guarding that wing player, he's running to the corner. So they're doing an X cross out. They're making an X on the court. And they've been trying to do those a lot, I see, over the last few games. And they're not really being sharp with those. A lot of times one person does it, the other person does it. One person closes out way too fast. Now you got 2-on-1 at the rim. They need to clean that up. Their backside rotations have to get much better. But outside of that, I mean, obviously that's something the Pistons can do. But I feel like a lot of this was attributed to, and I'm not making excuses at all, 40-point quarters have to stop. This is awful. And like I just said, the rotations have to get better. But a lot of it, I feel like, had to do with the fact that the Grizzlies have an MVP-type player in Ja Morant, and the Pistons didn't feel comfortable switching, which Dwayne Casey talked about before the game. I don't feel like they went to drop very much. A lot of time, well, they did. If they didn't switch, they went to drop some. But in that first quarter, they decided to trap and blitz them. And they basically said, you're going to have to beat us. Someone else is going to have to beat us, and you're going to have to hope that the guy rolling to the rim or the guy who gets this pass makes the right play. And in that first quarter, they did it over and over and over again. So that's just an opposing team having an MVP type player that makes this kind of gravity on the defensive side of the ball that can really just bend your entire defense. And if you don't got good rotation on the backside, if you don't have great communication, he's just going to shred you without scoring. And he had 7 points himself already in the first. Like that, that was a good quarter scoring wise. But he also, him having 5 assists, really just did the Pistons in. It wasn't his 7 points. It was how he was just dissecting their defense, and getting open shots for his team over and over and over again. So that's something that the Pistons have to get better on. Their defense is a major issue. They have to get better rotating. Everybody from the 5 down to the 1. They all have to get better rotating on the backside, on the weak side. They have to be better communication-wise. There was a few miscommunications they had even on what pick and roll defense coverage they were running, and it led to open layups. So just overall, the entire defense. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Actually, before I end this, there are 2 plays I want to mention too that just highlight lack of defensive IQ. Ja Morant might be the fastest person in the NBA. He might be the most explosive person in the NBA. He also might be the quickest. So if he's at the top of every single one of those, he might very well be the most athletic player in the NBA. And when I say fastest, I don't mean just without the ball. I mean with the ball in his hands, he might be the fastest player in the league as well. So he's just one of the most athletic players we've seen over the last 10, 15 years. Okay, he's crazy. So pressing him off of defensive rebounds, or at the end of, let's say, if there's 7 seconds left and they're inbounding the ball and they're underneath their rim and you press up on them, is just stupid to do because he's just going to go right around you in 2 seconds. And now he's playing now they're playing 5-on-4 on offense. And the Pistons did this twice, and they gave him a layup back-to-back times doing it. The first time they did it, Killian Hayes, they shot a ball, they missed it, he got a defensive rebound, and Killian Hayes, instead of just sprinting back, tried to pressure him a little bit, bring it up the court, and Josh is too quick. He's too explosive. He's just going to do one throw-ahead dribble. You're not going to beat him to that dribble, and now he's at the rim. And he came down with that back-breaking dunk in that third quarter. That, my God, that was just crazy. But that's simply lack of defensive IQ by the Pistons, by Killian Hayes there, a lapse in defense. And then there was another try in the fourth quarter where I believe it was Jane Ivey, or it was Corey Joseph, who tried pressing Ja Morant with 7 seconds left in the quarter, and the Grizzlies were inbounding underneath their own basket. You need to get back and have him dribble to you. Pressing him, he did the same thing. He did one throw-ahead dribble by Corey Joseph. Corey Joseph has no chance, and now Ja Morant's through the rim in under 3 seconds gets a left-hand layup. That's just stuff that you can't do. Now, those 2 plays weren't right. The Pistons lost, but it's just 2 examples of this team just not having the best understanding, of just having too many mental lapses, whichever way you want to go with it, whether it's lack of IQ or defensive lapses. They have too many of them. And those are 2 examples that really frustrated me watching them. And it goes to why they gave up 40 points in a quarter. You can't keep doing that and expect to win games, no matter how well you play the rest of the game. So that's something they have to clean up. I'm sure the coaching staff will talk about it. And I'm interested to see if they come out with some better opening defense in their next game. I don't know who they play next. I haven't looked. I don't know when's the next time they play. I believe they play on Tuesday, but I forget who they play. But either way, first quarter defense has to get much better by the Pistons. When we come back, I want to talk about Sadiq Bey having himself a nice bounce back game in a game that just wasn't very fun to watch. I'll be honest with you. I'm sure a lot of you guys felt that way. I went to the gym actually. I had a pickup session at my high school. I recorded the game, and when I got back, I rewatched it. Yeah, and a lot of you guys were telling me don't watch it, but I watched it anyways. Wasn't a very fun game, but Sadiq Bey was one of the bright spots in this game. We want to talk about what led to him having a bounce back game, something I noticed that's a little different with how they handle him off the bench. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car that you want wherever you want it from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the UK, US, Canada, and Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, holiday, or even prom. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B. Test drive that new electric car vehicle that you've had your eye on to see if it fits in your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Forget about those boring rental cars that you can get somewhere else and find your drive at Turo.com. So I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So the score makes it look a little closer than it actually was. I don't feel like this game ever actually was close at all. The Grizzlies were in control of this game from the get-go, and it got like to a point where Ja had to come back in the game in the fourth quarter. I believe the Pistons cut it down to 13, but like they never cut it underneath 10, I don't believe. And it just wasn't. It wasn't a very close game. The score would make it look like it wasn't bad, but the Grizzlies were in control of the entire game. And there's a lot of negatives you can take from. There's a lot of things that we could talk about that Pistons struggled with in this game, players that struggled. But instead, before we get into any other play, I want to talk about Sadiq Bey, who had a very nice game off the bench here. So right out the gate, he still isn't hitting outside shots. He has to start hitting those. But outside of that, he had a nice bounce back game. He had 24 points, 7 assists, and 6 rebounds. Now, you guys remember a few podcasts ago, I came on here and said that Bojan Bogdanovic, Alec Burks, and Sadiq Bey cannot go in a game with 0 assists. I believe, I don't remember which game it was, but they all had like 0 or 1 assist. And that's that was unacceptable. I believe Killian Hayes had like more than half of their assists. If you took his away, I believe they ended up with like 4 or whatever in that game. And I came on here, I was like, bro, if you guys are going to have the ball in your hands that much, you cannot have 0 assists. You have to be able to make the right play. You have to be able to see the open teammate when defenses put their eyes on you. And you can't just go for your shot every single time. Your offense is going to fall apart. You can't do that. And in this game, he had 7 assists, which was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic from Sadiq. I can't remember the last time I believe Sadiq had like over 5 assists in the game. So him having 7 was fantastic. Outside of his 3-point shots, he was 6 of 10 from all 2-pointers, and he drew 12 free throws. Now, he hit 9 of those. He's been above 90% free throw shooter for the year. He only hit 9 of them. That's 75% in this game. But nonetheless, he got to the free throw line 12 times, which is more than any other Piston had, obviously. And he had 12 of their 30 free throws. And what I believe the Pistons did differently in this game for Sadiq, and I think I kind of talked about it just a tad, like last week, I believe, when they first brought him off the bench. These last few games, the Pistons aren't operating with the bench lineup that they had at the beginning of the year. Like the bench lineup at the beginning of the year, they didn't have many ball handlers, many guys looking to score off the bench. This is when Killian Hayes was just struggling for the worst he's ever struggled in his career. You had that going on. And outside of that, you didn't have no one else on the bench that was really capable of scoring. But now they got Alec Burks, who is ready to ball handle and score for himself as well, obviously, self-create. You got Jaden Ivey and Killian Hayes, who are being staggered with the bench. So whether it's Killian with the lineup and how he's playing now, looking for his own shot, or Jaden Ivey, who obviously is looking for his own shot, that's 2 guys now. And then you add in Sadiq Bey. So now you have 3 players on the floor who are all used to having the ball in their hands and need the ball in their hands to score. And sometimes he's out there with Bojan too. Sometimes it's Bojan, Ivey, and Sadiq. Maybe it's Sadiq Bey, Burks, and Ivy. Like, whatever the case is, usually the Pistons always have at least like 3 guys on the floor who operate well with the ball in their hands or want the ball in their hands. And what had been happening, I feel like, over the last few games with him coming off the bench, Sadiq was kind of being passive. And it wasn't just on him. I feel like the Pistons weren't really going to him with him coming off the bench because they were going a lot to Alec Burks, high pick and roll in, Alec Burks do his thing. They were going a lot to Jay and Ivy when he was on the floor getting staggered. Him and Killian Hayes, a lot of high pick and roll with him. Whether it's Bojan, they go to Bojan a lot. And a lot of times, you found Sadiq just spotting up. And I feel like if this was Sadiq from his rookie year, who's hitting 38, 39% from deep on a lot of attempts, then maybe you could get away with that. But Sadiq's not hitting his outside shot. He hasn't been a very consistent shooter over the last 2 years. That's not where he can make his primary. That's not where he makes his money now. That's not where he's going to just achieve from. You need to get him the ball and let him try to get to the rim, draw some fouls, draw some free throws, get some layups, and that's how he's effective. So just having him, as like the third option out there when he's coming off the bench, playing with Alec Burks or Bojan, whoever it is on the floor, you're kind of defeating the purpose of why you're bringing him off the bench, which was at the time that you have enough scoring in the starting lineup. You have enough guys in the starting lineup who need the ball in their hands, and the defense was awful with him and Sadiq and Bojan. You brought in another big to try help with the defense, help with rebounding, and since the bench was struggling to score, you bring Sadiq to the bench and let him operate and be like the scoring option off the bench. And that wasn't happening over the last few games. This past game, though, I feel like they went to him a ton. They ran their offense a lot through him, and more times than not, he made the right decision. Obviously, there's a few times where he probably could have made a better pass, but more often than not, he made the right decision, and he was scoring really well and drawing fouls and finding open teammates. That's big time. If you're going to be the primary guy off the bench, now some guys can get away with it. Some guys who are just lights out scorers, like, I don't know how much J.R. Smith averaged in his prime, but like when J.R. Smith was averaging or being a 6 man of the year guy, I'm sure he wasn't coming in creating for people. He was coming in just to be one of the most efficient off the bench scorers we've seen. Just go out there and ball out. Like, if you can do stuff like that, then maybe you can get away with this some. But most of the time, if you're coming off the bench as the primary initiator and you're a scorer, you still have to have some kind of playmaking with you to at least have the defenses respect other teammates, and you can kind of bend the defense in different ways. And if Sadiq's going to be able to, and I don't expect him to have 7 assists every game. That's probably like going to be the most we see from Sadiq for a while. But I do expect him to have like 3, 4, sometimes 5 assists coming off the bench. And I hope the Pistons continue to run through him. Alec Burks has been really nice. I hope they continue to go to him as well. But I think they need to do a better job of balancing both of those guys off the bench like they did this past game. I thought Sadiq had a very, very good game. And again, a lot of it came to the Pistons just going through him and he making the right decisions over and over. And I hope they see this game, see how well he played off the bench, and realize this is how they need to play with him moving forward. There needs to be, and this is something I talked about at the very beginning of the year and a concern of mine I had in the offseason. I told you guys. I understand this is a young team. I understand there's a lot of guys on this team that believe they can be something. They can believe this. They can become this. They can become that. Yada, yada, yada. They're trying to develop. But at some point, there needs to be a hierarchy within your offense. Like everybody having the green light to create for themselves. Everybody just, wanting to go ISO and run pick and rolls. Like, it's cool, but at some point, you need to establish a hierarchy so the guys you need to get the ball are actually getting their reps. Like Sadiq should be either 1 or 2 off the bench in the hierarchy. He needs to be getting the ball and his touches to create for himself and hopefully others. Alec Burks is right up there with him. 1A, 1B, whatever you want to say. Now, I don't think they're going to be going to the ball with Kevin Knox. I don't think they're going to be giving the ball to Diallo, who played the whole fourth quarter, had a fine game. They don't need to be going to Corey Joseph and having him run the offense and run through him. Like, they're not that's not doing nothing for development and helping those guys. The 2 guys that need to be having the ball in their hands off the bench and creating for the bench is Sadiq Bey and Alec Burks, and they need to establish that kind of hierarchy. So I'm not saying those other guys can never touch the ball or those guys should never be able to run pick. I'm not saying that. But every team has itself a hierarchy, and guys know, okay, this guy is going to be the guy who handles the ball the most. This guy's going to be creating for our offense. I need to be able to do this off ball, etc. Most teams, they have that. That. And I feel like over the last few games, they were a little confused, or Sadiq at least was a little confused about where does he fall in this new, because he's new to the bench. He doesn't want to come out here and just start stepping on toes of other guys who are coming off the bench. So I feel like he was a little confused about how he should fit in with those guys at first, but this past game, I think they did a really good job of that, and Sadiq had a really nice game. Again, he had 24 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. He shot 7 of 16 from the field, but had 12 free throws in this game. So, again, he was plus 12 on the night, too, in a game the Pistons lost by 10. So, he played a really good night, Sadiq Bey. So, I want to give him a lot of credit. When we come back, though, some other things that the Pistons have to improve on, some little notes that I've picked up on in this game that I want to talk about that we're going to continue to watch for moving forward that need to improve from here on out. We'll talk about that when we get back. But first, I got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends from every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer and esports, they've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about their trends and action today. And if you head over to BetOnline.net and you click on that basketball tab, you will see they got the favorites for MVP, Coach of the Year, Championship odds, Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, Most Improved Player of the Year. All that kind of stuff they have underneath the basketball tab at BetOnline.net. Go check that out. Who do you guys think should be the favorite? And do you guys agree with some of the odds over at BetOnline.net? Go check that out at their website today or use your mobile device to learn more about their trends and action today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so you guys remember how after that last game, actually, I don't believe, we didn't have a podcast actually when Dwayne Casey said this, or at least when I noticed there, I saw it. So after the last game against the Dallas Mavericks, Dwayne Casey was asked about after the game about the two big man lineup having 13, 12 rebounds against Dallas. And he said exactly what I said in this podcast the first game they played together when Isaiah Stewart came back. And he said that the reason why they are starting this two big man lineup is to dominate the paint, to help with the rebounds, dominate the rebounds, and to be bigger than guys. Try to play bigger. And if they're not going to do that, if they're not going to win the rebounding battle, if they're not going to win the paint battle, then he said, quote, might as well start Corey Joseph then. Meaning, the whole purpose of starting these two guys next to each other, Isaiah Stewart and Marvin Bagley, is to try to play bigger and to win rebounds, to be physically dominating in the paint and make your presence known down there. And if you're not going to do that, the Pistons need to look at other options. Now, it's only been 3 games, and they had a really good game against the Dallas Mavericks. But the Dallas Mavericks don't have a very big lineup. They play with Dorian Finney-Smith at the 4 and what's his name? Dwight Powell at the 5. So they're not very big. But it was good to see that against a team that's not very big, the Pistons big men made it clear that they weren't very big and that they were going to set the tone physically in that game. So it was nice to see that. But now in this game, they go against the Memphis Grizzlies, who are a pretty physical team. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not a very good rebounder. He actually is I don't actually think he's even a good rebounder for his size, to be honest. But Brandon Clark, who is not much bigger than these guys. He's not like some big, strong, intimidating guy. But he's a very athletic and energetic guy. So I guess I thought it would be an even matchup for the Pistons big men. I thought they'd do a good job, or at least a decent job. And they didn't. They did a horrific job. Isaiah Stewart only had 4 rebounds. Marvin Bagley had 5. That's less. If you combine their rebounds, they still have less rebounds than Brandon Clark, who had 14 in this game. That's unacceptable. The Memphis Grizzlies won the rebounding battle, 46-39. It wasn't too bad. But again, the Pistons, the big man didn't even lead the team in rebounding for the Pistons. Jaden Ivey did. Jaden Ivey had 6 rebounds himself. He led the team in rebounds. Him and Sadiq Bey had 6. Kevin Knox had 5. So, I think the players around them helped the big guys out a little bit, and they got more active on the glass, which is a good sign. You want to see them get more active on the glass. But the Pistons big man, again, this is just something that you have to watch throughout the year. Like Dwayne Casey said, if you're going to start these 2 guys and you're going to go, quote, big in your front court, then they have to win the rebounding battle. They have to win the paint battle. They need to dominate that. or there's no point. You might as well just go back to a pure offensive lineup and just say, screw it, we'll just try to outscore guys because the big man lineup isn't doing what we need to do anyways. So we might as well just go offense. So I think they will reevaluate this lineup in about, I think they'll probably give it like a month and a half, I think. I think you'll see them reevaluate the lineup in like February. They'll give it a good sample size to look back on and say, okay, did they improve at rebounding? Did they improve at playing together, et cetera, et cetera? They're going to give it a good time to adjust and play together, and they should. Absolutely, I agree. Not saying that they need to can it already, but we're going to evaluate it after every game and see and give it a report card and see how it's going, see how it's developing. And less than 10 rebounds from your starting center and starting power forward is utterly unacceptable. Like that's wild. You just can't have that. That's crazy talk. So they have to be better. They have to play more physical. They have to make it known that they're playing big, or again, they just can't run it. They won't be running it in February or March. They'll abandon it. So that has to improve. We'll continue to watch that. But yeah, that's something they have to improve on. Another thing that I really didn't like seeing from this game were, actually, I shouldn't say what I really didn't like. Let me backtrack a little bit with that. What needs to improve? Now, he's a rookie. It's a good learning experience. He needs to go through these things to learn, look back at film, get better. I'm sure he will get better. I'm sure he will adjust, and he'll learn from this, obviously. But Jaden Ivey had a really, 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 really bad fourth quarter. Like when the Pistons were trying to make a comeback in this game, and again, I don't think they ever really were threatening the Grizzlies, but they did get it to 10 at some point, and they were trying to forge a little comeback. Jaden Ivey, I feel like actively was hurting it. And he was a minus 23 in this game. And I felt every bit of the minus 23. He was just moving way too fast. And turned the ball over in bad situations. There's a few fast breaks off a Piston steal or a block. A really good defensive possession where he just forced the issue going down. Either went up for a shot and just threw something crazy up, or went too fast and tried to throw a pass and turn the ball over. He had 2 turnovers tonight where he tried to do a flashy pass to a wide open guy. And since he went for a flashy no look, he overthrew it or threw it somewhere else and turned the ball over. That kind of thing is something that he just has to improve on. I really am not a big fan of, like, you can go for the flashy pass. Obviously, in some situations, you hype up the crowd, hype up your teammates, get it going, momentum-wise. But every single pass does not need to be a flashy pass. Every single pass does not need to be. Sometimes it's okay just to make the simple bounce or chest pass. Like, that's completely fine. You don't have to do a flashy every time, especially when you're turning the ball over as much as he does on these flashy passes that don't need to be flashy. So that has to improve. Again, this is something that he was we talked about before the season that was going to be a struggle for him, learning when to slow it down, when to decelerate, when to use the speed and when not to. Like, that's something he's going to have to learn, and it's going to take him a while to do that. A lot of guys don't just come in immediately and know how to do that. It takes them a while to learn how to play or to change speeds, knowing when to go full throttle and when to slow it down, play slow, and then go back. Like, it takes a while to do that. He's going to have to adjust. But this was a rough fourth quarter by Jaden Ivey for the Pistons. And I'm okay with Dwayne Casey letting him play through that. I'm okay with him letting all the guys play through it and bringing the starters back in, somewhat of the starters back in, and letting them play through a bad game by them. I'm cool with that. But yeah, not a very good fourth quarter by Jaden Ivey at all. Definitely not one that he wants to look back at. But they should show it to him in Phil's session so he can learn from it. Outside of that, I don't really got anything else to say. I feel like that's all my takeaways from this game. Killian followed up his Dallas game with a 13-6 game. He shot 5 of 13 from the field. He missed a few of his mid-range shots that he's been going for over the past month and a half. Good shots still. A lot of them look good. Went out. It is what it is. I told you guys he'll have a game when he doesn't make them as much. And as long as he's going to the same shot, as long as he's playing the exact same way, getting the same shots, playing aggressive, you'll see more good performances like we've seen over the past month. So nothing too big. I'm happy with his performance. He went 3 of 5 from deep too. That was really nice to see. So like this game from him. Thought he played fine, played well. Had 2 turnovers I thought were really bad though. 2 turnovers and then that defensive possession we talked about in the beginning of the podcast against Ja. Those are my 3 biggest gripes with him in this game. That was really 3 bad reps by him. But outside of that, man, this was just like, obviously the Pistons defense needs to be better. Their offense is okay. But more, I don't want to make it sound like I'm making an excuse, but more than anything, I feel like this was kind of just like an MVP caliber player letting you know to a bad team, you guys aren't on my level. I'm gonna let you guys know you guys don't belong out here, and that's basically what Ja did. Ja was exceptional. 33 and 10, 12 with 23 from the field. He was crazy. So I feel like that's really what was the most. Obviously, they want to get better defensively, but Ja really just took over the game, and he's an MVP player. That's what they do. So the Pistons need to get one of those players. Hopefully, Cade is that type of player when he gets back healthy, whether it's this year or next year. But yeah, you see what Ja did tonight. That's what the Pistons need from someone eventually. Somebody who can dominate a game like that and completely just set the tone. So is what it is. The Pistons will bounce back in the next game. I forget who they go against. I believe they play on Tuesday, but those are my takeaways from today's game. Let me know in the comment section down below how you guys felt about this game, or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Subscribe button at the YouTube channel, Locked On Pistons. 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe, everybody. Go Pistons, and peace out.